Hey, thanks for joining me today. We've had quite a few clients over the last few years who have started inquiring to us about cyber liability and whether it's important. And while we do a lot of cybersecurity and protection on that side, I'm no insurance expert, and I know you are. And so you handle a lot of business insurance and cyber liability and things like that. So I was just hoping we could ask I could ask you some general questions. You can kind of answer that. And I thought it might be a good primer, especially for something I can direct people to in terms of, getting the right information. I mean, my thought is always that I would never want anybody to not carry cyber liability, because I mean, even with everything you could possibly put in place, there's still a risk, right?
Absolutely. Definitely.
All right. So would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what your business is?
Well, I guess first I'll introduce myself. My name's Will Sincerney with the insurance office. I'm one of the owners here. I specialize in business insurance, so we handle property and casualty, everything from liability insurance, property, cyber, errors and omissions insurance. I've been doing this for about 18 years now.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, I guess let's start with this. What is cyber liability?
So cyber liability covers a business from basically data breaches, hacking, social engineering, which would be wiring money to a fraudulent account without knowing. And it can also cover losses, material losses to, maybe replacing a computer, things like that.
Okay. And I've had this question so many times from different people, but a lot of times I'll have clients ask me, they'll say, what is my real risk? And I'm like, even if it's like 1%, to me, in my opinion, your business is your asset, right? So it's like, I just figure you should never not have cyber liability. What is your take on that? Is there any reason a business wouldn't carry cyber liability at this point?
No, absolutely not. Cyber liability has become a lot more affordable in the last few years. It covers you everything from, releasing clients' data, which can be devastating to a business, to covering extortion, where they lock down your computer and you cannot run your business until you pay that limit or whatever. I don't know what you would call that, but usually it's between $5,000 and $10,000, and a business is more than willing to pay that to get their computers unlocked. So everyone should have cyber liability.
Okay. So there are, I know there are a couple different pieces to this, but because you kind of have data breach where somebody has gained access to data, and there's a difference between cyber liability and data breach, correct?
Yes, there's a distinction between data breach, and I can go into that if you want. Data breach basically is the bare minimum of coverage, and most people may have this included in their policy, but basically it just notifies clients that we've released your data.
Okay.
Which is usually not, businesses could do that on their own. They could pay for the notification. Cyber liability is basically all the coverages that you need. It would, pay for your defense in a lawsuit. Should you release people's information, it would pay to hire someone like yourself to come in and clean that up. It would pay a ransom if someone was extorting your business. It would also cover money should you wire money to someone that you think's a contractor and they turn out to be a hacker.
Okay. So what would be the typical cost? I mean, I know it's probably based on revenue, right? And risk, assume, based on the industry?
Yeah, so it's based off of three main, factors. One would be your revenue. Two would be the number of client data you gather or keep. and usually 3 would be the industry you're in. There are some industries that are more likely to be hacked than others.
Gotcha. Okay. So I just kind of maybe give a better perspective. I know sometimes sharing examples of where cyber liability would have come in handy or has been used potentially is good. So where are some of the biggest areas you've seen cyber liability be useful in your personal experience? You don't have to share, obviously, you don't want to share contact information or anything like that, or companies, but just generally, like maybe talk about an industry where you've seen something happen or where you've seen it save somebody's butt, or maybe where they haven't had it. And if they would have had it, what that gap is, like, could they have saved $100,000? What does that look like?
Yeah, so a few examples. There's one local example of social engineering where a local, I guess you would say, business did wire money. It was $1.7 million to who they thought was a contractor doing an addition, and it ended up being a hacker. And they did not have the social engineering coverage to cover that. The contractor called them up and said, "Where's our money?" And they said, "We sent it to you." And it was actually $1.7 million that they were out. That's my largest example that I have.
Let me just ask you this. In that example, so $1.7 million is obviously, that's a huge, huge amount of money. And probably in that instance, a little bit of education on their part and some scrutiny on their process is probably a big missing piece. But in terms of if they had insurance, what would the difference be between paying $1.7 million and having a cyber liability policy that would cover that? What do you think they would have saved? It's just
well, the cyber liability would have probably cost them $1,500 a year.
Okay.
And the portion of the coverage that would have 1.7 million may have cost them $500 of that 1,500 to cover that. Yeah. So
that makes me sweat a little bit.
Right.
That's that's okay. That's a good one. That's probably a good leading example. Anything, I mean, is there any other, like, maybe even smaller examples of where you might have some stuff?
For example, so we have a local salon spa that actually got hacked, and they were extorted for $10,000. So basically they walked into their business, their computers were locked down. They did not have the coverage, and they had declined to have it. They had data breach coverage, okay, in which they thought that was sufficient, and it ended up, and they gladly paid the $10,000 to have their computers, turned back on for them, in which they were.
Wow. And
they purchased the policy, which ended up costing them about $1,400 a year, which would have taken care of that ransom.
So let me ask you this. Since they purchased the policy after the fact, I'm assuming there's a premium because they had to disclose that they had a previous breach.
Correct. There is a slight premium, and it ended up being about $1,400 a year for the policy, which would normally have cost them somewhere in the ballpark of $1,000.
Okay, so that's pretty significant too. So, like, even preemptively or proactively seeking out some type of cyber liability policy is going to save you more money than, obviously, because you're paying for the breach and then you're going, oh crap, I need the cyber liability. So then you're paying for it after the fact, and you're also paying a premium because you were breached.
Correct. Yeah.
All right.
And basically, from research that we have, a breach in which you release clients' information typically cost a business between $100,000 and $250,000, depending on the size and the scope of the breach. But that's what you're looking at. And like I said, to take care of that with coverage used to be a little more expensive, but now it's more reasonable.
Right. Well, I know there are two examples I can think of specifically that were probably pretty impactful for, like, social engineering and actually a data breach. I know there was a CPA firm that they had talked to me after the fact, but the IT company that they were using had left some pretty, let's just say, insecure passwords and accounts on their server with administrative access, and somehow probably just a dictionary hack, to be honest, because it was like, it'd be like a user, like for your scanner. Sometimes I've seen people set up scanner with the password scanner or no password, and then they give it elevated privileges. So as soon as somebody hits it, they have access to basically everything they want. So for them, they had a breach. Once they found the breach, they had to disclose it. Now, insurance, I know that they had insurance as part of their thing. So they did have cyber liability, but I know the bill came out to something like, because they hired a company that had to remediate it, the insurance company recommended and all this stuff. I think for them, they were a small shop too. They weren't huge, but I think they told me it's something around the tune of $60,000 for everything.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I think you could spend $100,000 no problem on this, especially if you have to get, and you can be penalized by the state. I mean, we're supposed to be protecting our clients, information.
Well,
I mean, insurance agency, and it's my duty to protect your information.
I know there are more laws, and this is state by state as well, but I know there are more laws going into place about things like businesses are required to have a certain level of cybersecurity training, like just education in general. I know New York was like one of the leading states in that area. So, and I don't know all the laws, but I do try to keep up with some of that stuff because it does apply obviously to us and to the industries that we work for. So the other big one I thought of when you were talking about that was there was a fairly good sized manufacturer, and I had heard it happen to them was that somebody created, one of the things that people do with the social engineering stuff, and like you talked about with that kind of like man in the middle attack where they'll send a fake invoice or whatever. I've seen this happen before where somebody will register a domain that's like one letter off. All right. So if my domain is insurancecompany.com, they might spell insurance without the E on the end. But when people look at the email, they're not scrutinizing the domain. They're just saying, oh, this is from Will, right? So they're responding to that email, and sometimes people are finding out about these transactions and injecting themselves in the middle of the conversation, and that's kind of where this stuff happens. But with this particular company, somebody had contacted their HR department and said, hey, we need everybody's W-2. And now in those instances, like I said, I think one of the primary things is like, listen, if you're just handing out information freely, you obviously have an issue with an internal process, right? And there's that education piece. Like, you never expect everybody to know everything, and not everybody's tech savvy and knows what to look for. So the education piece is huge. But that's a big deal. I mean, I can't imagine me being a business owner finding out that, we've somehow inadvertently, without any due process, released personal information of every single person that we work for, even clients. I mean, that could be devastating. Even with insurance, I mean, your credibility is like gone, right?
Right.
So,
well, and it's so important to have these policies in place, just because you never know, who's going to click on that wrong email, or, maybe the person in your HR who would never hand out the W-2 is off that day, and someone's busy, they're trying to fill in, and they send that email out. And once it's out, it's too late. You need to have coverage for that.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to make this, 30 minutes long, but I did want to close with just a couple thoughts. And then I do want you to share your information in case, because I want people to see this as a resource, and especially when people come to me, I want to be able to refer them to you, because believe me, I don't want to be their attorney. I don't want to speak into insurance either. I don't want, anything that's out of my wheelhouse. I could talk about technology. I could talk about cyber insurance or cyber security, but this is not my world. So I kind of live in it, but I'm not the expert. So one of the things I was just going to kind of end with on my side is, from my standpoint, you know, cyber liability is like a piece of the pie, right? It's got to be there. You have to do things to protect yourself on both ends of the spectrum, financially and practically, and everything in the middle. So things like when we approach clients, we give them everything that we need from that standpoint, and that the cyber insurance policy to me is icing on the cake. You know, but you have to do all the practical stuff too: employee education, training, you know, strong password policies, and the thing with like, you know, we talked about the crypto locker stuff, or, you know, where the ransomware. A good backup really can solve that problem. A good backup that they can't have access to, because I mean, if you have your data backed up and you can restore it, then you don't care that somebody locked all your systems. You can restore it, you can fix that, you can lock them out. Data breach is a different story, because if you have sensitive information leaked, you still have to disclose that. But you can do a lot of things to prevent or possibly prevent the data breach. So, you know, things like two-factor authentication, right? Where you get the code on your phone when you need to log into something. I mean, just a password alone is really not enough nowadays. So those are some of the basic things that I look for, or I would like advise a company to do. But even with all that in place, it's like, call Will, you know, review your policy. And I did, you know, sorry, one thing, I'm a little scatterbrained sometimes, but I did want to ask you, like, do you do some kind of gap analysis for companies as well to figure out what the difference is between what they have and like what they should have?
Absolutely. It's something that takes about 15 minutes.
Okay.
Just do. And, you know, we go through, we can point out the gaps, and then, you know, come up with some solutions. And usually they're very affordable.
Nice. Okay. So, well, thanks again. I appreciate you taking the time to kind of go over some of the basics of the cyber insurance and help educate me and everybody else. Would you mind just talking about what's the best way for a business to get in touch with you if they want to talk about their cyber insurance policy?
You can call me personally. Our phone number is 440-333-3555, or you can shoot me an email. It's will@insoh.com.
Awesome. Okay. Well, hey, thanks again. Yeah, I look forward to maybe connecting again. I'm sure some other topics will come up, and I appreciate you.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot.